Today we dare to compare two different electric station wagons that couldn't be more different. We're talking about the design, we both drive, we compare the software, we compare the space in the second row, we compare the trunk, and we compare the apps with each other. Hello there, and welcome to this brand new video here at Jonos and to the comparison of the Nio ET5 Tourer and the VW ID.7 Tourer. These are two vehicles that don't seem all that comparable at first sight because the ET5 Touring is not only 20 centimeters shorter, but its overall shape and size also make it appear more like a compact car. Sporty station wagon model, while the ID.7 Tourer is set to replace the Passat, making it significantly more practical. However, when you look at the list prices and make sure they are equipped in a truly comparable manner, you arrive at almost precisely the same price point. And that's why I thought, let's compare them with each other. Today, more static. As you can see, I have the normal ID.7 here in the Pro version, which we recently had for you in the long-distance test. And here, basically the regular ET5, but with a large battery. And it's kind of like comparing Formula 1 with floor models. It has 77 kilowatt-hours, der über 90. This one only has 286 horsepower, and this one 490, just to get the specs out of the way. However, to be fair, you should take the ID.7 GTX, which comes with 340 horsepower. It's still a bit away from those 490, but then it has 86 kilowatt-hours of battery capacity, a similar range, and is also priced similarly. Thus, we're reviewing trunks, interior, and software today. Let's find out where there's more space and where you actually get some features for your money. And if you like that, feel free to write me comments because then I'll get the ID.7 again as a GTX Tourer and we'll do an actual comparison. We'll compare consumption, suspension, and other dynamic aspects. Today, I'm more focused on the static impression. I'm curious to know your thoughts. Please leave feedback in the comments. As you see, I've brought my measuring tool again. We measure the trunk, we actually test how the stroller fits in and many other things. And we'll start outside with the roundup, of course. Typical for electric cars, both models come with a very closed front. With respect to design and the overall aesthetics, at the lower part of both models, you will find functional air outlets that extend along the full sideline, alongside air inlets to effectively the fans, but also to efficiently supply the climate control system with fresh air. The Nio is equipped with distinctive split headlights, while the VW boasts a striking continuous light strip along with an illuminated VW logo. Overall, the Nio appears much sportier, while the ID.7 is more subtle. This is naturally due to their origins. As mentioned earlier, VW wants to replace the Passat. And you can see that, for example, in the wheels. At VW, it's extremely aerodynamically optimized, and at Nio, very sporty with the big Brembo brake. The VW, with a length of 4.96 meters, is more than 16 centimeters longer than the Nio. Having a comparable wheelbase leads to visibly shorter overhangs. Both models are then charged at the back. The Volkswagen is charged at the rear right with a mechanical flap, while here it is rear left with an electric one. And that has some pros and cons. Parking on the left is naturally a bit more challenging, especially when you frequently park on the street side in urban areas. Then this flap and especially the cable usually point towards the roadway. Therefore, this car charges effectively at Tesla's superchargers. That's growing increasingly crucial, especially when you consider the costs tied to charging nowadays. And since we're already discussing the topic of charging costs, we can also bring up charging at home. At my house, I regularly use Tipper, my electricity supplier, for this, since they offer a dynamic electricity tariff, and they are also sponsoring this particular video. Once again, it's the right time to change electricity tariffs, so why not finally make the switch over to a smart electricity tariff? Only pay what the electricity truly costs on the market right now, and at the moment, enjoy the promotion period lasting the next 3 years with no basic fee involved. That essentially means Tibber waives the usual monthly fee of €5.99, allowing you to use the plan. You won't pay that for the next 3 years, and below the video, you can also get €50 credit with the code JONAS. To be able to use a cool Zeptec wallbox at home, for example. Both the Nio and the VW then benefit from Tibber's smart charging. Regardless of the wallbox, the vehicles always charge only when the electricity is actually cheapest. You tell how much electricity you need in the car at least, and then Tibber charges the car so that it works most cost effectively. Makes it quite easy for me to strongly suggest you use the electricity tariff with an electric vehicle, because when prices go up, you don't really have to charge, and I personally wouldn't always do so. Plugging in and out, the clever algorithm does that by itself. So feel free to check out Tibber's green electricity below the video, save the basic fee for 3 years, and get an additional €50 voucher. I would say it's worth it. Let's take a look at the rear now. We had just looked at the overhangs, and here, in detail, you can see the VW noticeably protrudes at the back and is extremely boxy. The Nio slopes down a bit shorter and narrows at the top as well. This means that the VW builds up significantly more, especially when you remove the parcel shelf. Overall, I really like both of them a lot, and they each have distinct design lines, although the Nio frequently reminds people somewhat of Porsche. We'll start with the trunk of the smaller of the two, the Nio ET5 Touring. With 450 litres, that's not only nominally 100 litres less than the ID.7 in its smallest configuration. No, you can actually notice that too. I have my measuring device here, and we'll just take a look from the edge to the back. That's presently 96 centimeters, and concerning the width at the usual measurement spot right over here, you're looking at approximately 1 meter and 5 centimeters. What's important though is the loading up to the parcel shelf, and there we have 40 centimeters. Yes, with the elevated double load floor, you can also have the option to adjust and lower the floor slightly here in the Nio. It doesn't go all the way to the back, but you'll get maybe, I'd say, 5 to 8 centimeters more out of it. Of course, it always depends on whether or not you decide to include this area. That's perfectly fine, and in those dimensions, it's really not bad at all. However, an upper limit is also important, and that's where it gets tricky. If we take the upper section here and go up to the trunk, then it's only 69 centimeters up here because of the backrest angle and also the trunk lid, which is relatively strong, and unfortunately you also can't adjust the backrest angle at this point. It's different in the ID.7 because for the first time, Volkswagen has introduced the so-called cargo position here. It means you can adjust the rear seats to 2 different angles using a clever mechanism on the backrest. It means you have the option to either. So you need to activate here once, which measures from the edge to behind 1.05 meters, or alternatively on the right side, it measures 1.06 meters. However, that's not everything, as it gets quite intriguing at the top section. Starting from here, using the edge solely as a reference point and moving towards the back at the highest point, we measure 88 centimeters here and also on the left side. So, at the same spot, it measures just 81. And that really makes a significant difference. This particular angle lets you load items in a much more relaxed and convenient manner. And here we also have the double loading floor that extends all the way back. And if we take the roll cover here and measure its dimensions, you'll find it's 45 centimeters in height, plus whatever extra space there is going downward. And that's when you truly notice the full length of the vehicle, because it indeed makes a significant difference. Then we're just missing the width, and here we have exactly 1 meter, so even slightly less. However, in the ET5 Touring, what's exciting for me in everyday life is now the topic of strollers. And no, I didn't pull out the large frame on purpose. In both, the smaller stroller frame fits much better, and it fits into both. In the ET5, it becomes quite clear that fitting it in is really a tight squeeze. You have to lay the tub sideways and carefully position the frame so that it almost touches the glass roof above. In the ID.7, it's much more relaxed because the tub fits lengthwise. This is a somewhat larger stroller, but intentionally to show what the maximum size is. If that one fits in, then all the others will easily fit in as well, just so you get a better sense of it here. With the ID.7, you might be able to fit an extra item or two. With the Nio, it's really over once you have a stroller. But it doesn't mean you have to differentiate cars with kids now. Rather, it means it's tight with big strollers, but like in many cars with a buggy, it becomes significantly more relaxed. Let's direct our attention to the interior, and it's clear to see that interiors, particularly in electric cars, are becoming increasingly similar. This trend can also be observed in combustion vehicles. A centrally positioned multimedia display and an ever-shrinking driver info display look almost identical in the Nio as in the VW. Here, only the driver info screen is larger, and the main display in the center is slightly smaller and has a different orientation. At Nio, exclusively above the main display, there's an optional feature called NOMI. Optionally, the VW also features AGR Ergo Active seats identified by the Campaign for Healthier Backs, which have fantastic massage functions and efficient ventilation. Similar quality can be found with Nio. Here, you also get a well-coordinated massage, heating, and ventilation. So no one really has the edge there. Nio comes across as a bit sportier in general. The roof can be relieved in both models. Electrochromatic dimming. In the VW, the feature is somewhat shorter, but it becomes remarkably milky, which is particularly beneficial for passengers in the rear seats. In the Nio, the roof is constructed from a clear substance that transforms into a dark violet hue, reducing the amount of light entering the cabin as desired. This feature can also be set to an automatic mode, and in this model, the roof extends further behind the heads of the passengers seated in the back. In the second row, there's lots of space in the Volkswagen. You truly gain from the vehicle's length here. Especially around the knees, you almost have too much space, in my opinion. The feet fit well under the front seats. The backrest can be adjusted, and the child seat fits extremely well within the space provided by the ISOFIX space. You can also continue to sit comfortably in the front here. It's similar in the Nio, at least in the upper area. The seats are positioned a bit lower, which makes it a bit harder to comfortably place your feet in front, and the space in the lower area is somewhat more limited. Let's delve a bit into driving matters and kick things off with the Nio. Thanks to one of the most recent updates, the feature of one-pedal driving has been added. You really begin to notice its effects when you set the regenerative braking function to the strong option. And then you can also recuperate to a complete stop. As you just saw, in driving mode, there are various options available here. The Sport Plus mode to accelerate from 0 to 104 seconds, and also the Comfort and Eco mode. However, the suspension doesn't change at all, since we have a classic steel suspension system here. That's well tuned in a sporty way, but I quite like it because it doesn't let everything through completely, and it's somewhat on a level similar to a good BMW steel suspension with M tuning. I have to say, it's really fun. What personally doesn't quite appeal to me is the seating position. Because sitting in this car, like in a Tesla Model 3, is quite high up. That means the dashboard is very low, and when you look forward, you can see very far down. And you always sit so elevated, even though you're actually in a sportier, lower car. It's just a package adjustment. The car isn't necessarily to blame for that. That was a fundamental decision with this car. I can reach everything easily, it's all ergonomic. But for almost everything, I have to make the settings through this display, whether it's the steering wheel adjustment, the mirror adjustment, and so on, just as you're used to with most modern vehicles. What I personally found impressive was the thorough revision and improvement in the assistance systems. This means just the active lane keeping and the adaptive cruise control. Because of that, it's really good and reliable. Works really well in everyday life, and there's no more of that shaking and that little bit of nervousness that you had at the beginning with Nio. Now, you really benefit from the use of LiDAR, and that approach is somewhat more forward-thinking compared to, for instance, Volkswagen, which relies solely on using radar technology. Traffic sign recognition isn't quite as strong here. Unfortunately, Volkswagen is missing the one-pedal driving feature. I can switch to B mode here to get a bit more recuperation, but the vehicle will never come to a complete stop unless going uphill or something like that. But it's consistently in a kind of, coasting, somewhat like an easing out motion mode. That is a deliberate decision made by the VW Group on the MEB platform. I often find it somewhat unfortunate because in reality, you can give people the option to decide for themselves what they would personally prefer. I really like the DCC from the suspension. And while earlier I mentioned in the Nio that it's just a pure steel suspension, here I have a few adjustment options. Optionally available in a package for the GTX, but then it comes standard. You have the convenient flexibility to finely tune and adjust the suspension in a variety of different stages. It's not like an air suspension, but you can definitely feel a noticeable difference. And you can also notice the difference in the car's concept, because I only have this small driver information display, but then the large AR helmet. Head-up that, for example, displays lines, distances, or even arrows on the surface, and you can see that here in the ID.7. I really like it, and it's quite a stark contrast to I don't have any head-up display in the Nio ET5. Overall, the seating here is very good. You have a nice overview and you sit lower in the vehicle, meaning I feel more integrated and don't have that elevated feeling. I could theoretically lower the seat quite a bit, but I don't want to because I actually have a very comfortable seating position found. You can reach everything easily, it's nicely ergonomic, and you also have a few switches for one or another adjustment option, which definitely always appeals to all of you out there. And then there's also the charging point. We haven't discussed Nio yet, but we should here because the two vehicles charge in different ways. Here we have the ID.7, which takes approximately 27.5 minutes to charge the smaller battery from 10% all the way up to 80%. With the larger battery, it's about 25 minutes. That's really fine. With Nio, the downside is that there are two different battery technologies. With the 100 kilowatt-hour battery, it means you have either a charging time of around 40 minutes. or even around 25, 26. And that's just a shame. It depends on which battery you currently have. Upon delivery, there's always a preferable option. But if you consider swapping, which means having the ability to actually exchange the battery, you can always receive one that's just a little over 90% charged. Then it's definitely quite bothersome when you end up getting the slower one, and then all that's left is indeed the software. We're not going to look at them in a ping-pong manner now. Instead, we'll go through them one by one for both models, starting with Volkswagen. The new interface is available here, offering the capability to install numerous programs. This encompasses, for instance, a gaming app, the popular Spotify app, as well as the exciting Air console, which enables you to enjoy gaming on the screen using your smartphone as a convenient controller. I hope that more will be added in the future. Meanwhile, the system is already running quite smoothly. It's user-friendly, and in my opinion, the route planning is presently one of the very best available on the market. I'm deliberately showing you here, without making any cuts, how I navigate from my home to Hamburg. You'll observe how rapidly this is actually computed, including all charging stops. You simply won't find this combination of speed and flexibility anywhere else on the market right now. Additionally, there is the option to determine the remaining range at the destination and at the charging stop measured in kilometers, and you can precondition along the route for the planned charging stops. But you can also activate it manually within the vehicle, which then ensures that you achieve the optimal charging speed even during the cold winter months. The tile design is a bit reminiscent of Apple CarPlay, and just like Android Auto, it's available wirelessly as a standard feature in this vehicle. The climate is controlled via the display, just like in the Nio, because there are only actuators here, but they can also circulate, for example, to better distribute the air inside the cabin. Now we come to the Nio and the noticeably smaller, at least subjectively speaking, display, because with the portrait orientation, you always have slightly less overall representation, even though their sizes in inches are quite close to each other. So once again, we're using navigation to Hamburg, and for the sake of comparison, it's presented here in its uncut form directly for you. In this particular scenario, planning the route requires noticeably more time, even when the essential charging stops are not being added. You see, this is being calculated here, but with the best internet connection, it was important for me to show this at this point, and you can see on the map where the Nio swapping stations are currently located, and one of them is also planned directly for the route. Because I initially have to go to the swapping station from here, where my battery will be exchanged, and afterwards there will be 2 additional charging stops along the way. They seem a bit too cautiously planned for my taste, since having to charge when at 30 or 40% feels like an unnecessary waste of the battery to me. You have the option to adjust the settings so that you arrive at the charging station with a lower battery percentage if you prefer. You can see that it was set to 4% here, so the car couldn't plan it any better at that point. That point goes a bit to Volkswagen. Just like with VW, there is also a native Spotify app on the vehicle here. If you prefer watching videos, you can make use of the Screen Hits app. Simply create a hotspot on your phone and connect your car via Wi-Fi. This allows you to stream your favorite content effortlessly inside the vehicle. Unfortunately, the car's internet isn't available for this. Maybe it'll return later. In the future, I find it cool though. Video streaming makes it more attractive. And overall, this system runs extremely smoothly. There are no glitches whatsoever, and updates have also been added, such as the GPT for Nomi. Promised at the beginning, and here they are, the apps for vehicles. The VW app comes with a handy widget. You'll receive a comprehensive overview. To unlock and lock the vehicle, you need to verify your identity just once with an official ID. Alternatively, for instance, you can start up the air conditioning and make several crucial settings adjustments. It's possible to set the charging limit or independently manage the AC charging current flow, or then also turn on the smart charging function. Additionally, there's a handy feature to plan a route directly using the smartphone. So from my vehicle's location to a destination, including charging stops. And you can get a sense of how long you're actually driving. I find that very practical in everyday life. And you can send it directly to the vehicle. The Nio app always seems like a community app where you have to look for your own car, but conveniently it's in the center at the bottom and offers a few more features. I find the climate control system, but also, for instance, the preconditioning of the battery, incredibly practical. And here you can also open and close the car and plan a route from the vehicle to a destination. This is almost analogous to VW and can then also be sent to the vehicle. And I find it very cool that you can also see the elevation parameters between the individual charging stops here. I haven't seen this with other manufacturers, and it really improves the charging experience while making route planning even simpler and more intuitive. And here once again are all the features laid out clearly for you, just like the process for scheduling a service appointment, which is also available. I'm really eager to hear all your thoughts on this. Please make sure to leave your feedback in the comments and let me know if you expected them to actually be this close together. I'm super excited about it. For me personally, both have their advantages. With the Nio, it's somewhat like what you might have had with a 3 Series touring BMW back in the day, this sporty type of vehicle that provides additional trunk space when you opt for the Tourer model instead of just the sedan, very much like how Volkswagen once used to offer the Golf models as station wagons back in the day. It's a bit in that segment. This one basically replaces the Passat, offering significantly more trunk volume, but it's also a much larger vehicle overall. And what puts their performance on the road, that's content for another video. But if you want to know why we have the Nio ET5 here so long, check up there. Below is the long-distance test for the ID.7 Tourer.